Bitcoiners, good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope you're doing well. Austin, nice to see you. Good morning. We got a Bitcoin graffiti with a cup of coffee. We got a Louis, hiya, Bitcoiners. We got a B for victory here. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed, it is a great morning, everyone. Good morning, sunshine, ABD, mempool. Didn't check it this morning. I think Bitcoin's running. I did not confirm before. But the sun's up, so we're halfway there. I think Bitcoin's running. I should have confirmed before, but was running. We had a weird fire drill last night, so I ignored it, obviously, but you never know, right? So there you go. I can confirm the sun came up. Okay, good. It's on your end of the world too that it's up, and it's gone back down where I am. Well, that's normal, right? That's pretty much normal. Good to have the additional confirmations. Indeed, it is still around on this side of the world. So we're good. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. So now get the coffee out of your mouth quickly, because the next little bit of Moscow time might leave a sort of bad, taste thing going on here. So I get this from Ireland. The Irish are in the running with the Canadians and the folks from New Zealand as the dumbest people in the world. I think it has to do with being like a small thing next to a big thing. The Belgians are pretty dumb too, and they speak French, and then you're France. So I think a lot of it has to do with being sort of a little country next to a little stupid country next to a big stupid country makes you just extra stupid in some ways, right? So I bet you, I don't know enough about Ireland, but I feel like everyone went to college there and they all have fancy college degrees. So now they have it all figured out, right? Really, like just enough people to vote for the Green Party. So here's what it says. This is in the Independent, a Irish newspaper, and they're very worried about the end of the world coming. Very worried about the end of the world because of climate change and all that stuff. So the Green Party asks that the public. This is the headline. All right. The Green Party asked the public to fart into jam jars for a week to help offset emissions from the Bray Air Show, because there's going to be airplanes there. So if everyone could just fart in a jar, according to the news, it would be good, right? So that's what we're after, farting in a jar. So it's Mother's Day this weekend. If you didn't know, it's Mother's Day. I don't know if it's Mother's Day everywhere, but it is in Canada and the United States. And this is from Toronto. This is from CTV News Toronto. So a school put up a sign, and it says, "Life does not come with a manual. It comes with a mom." All right, because it's Mother's Day, and the school wanted to put on the board outside, right in the front of the school in the yard, on the message board, right? Life does not come with a manual; it comes with a mom. But the CTV News reports that parents in Toronto are calling out a school for posting what they claim was a harmful and exclusionary Mother's Day greeting. So there you go. So no Mother's Day fun in Canada. I don't like it, right? But if you didn't hear, right, the biggest news in Twitter, everyone, right? We're going to talk about Twitter today, but there's the biggest news, and it comes from Canada, right? Hold on. If in case you were worried about where you're going to get your news from and who was on Twitter and what was going on, CBC News says yesterday, this is the biggest news in Twitter, right? CBC News is back. They're back on Twitter, guys. So here's what they say, right? So the Twitter handle today, because remember, they quit. They said no, but when they got called government-funded news, said no, they took such offense, so they're gone. So now they come back and they say, today the CBC will resume some activity on a handful of Twitter accounts, including CBC News, but we will significantly reduce our overall Twitter footprint and continue to assess the platform against our social media strategy. So they're back, but not, they had to let us know they're back because everyone's waiting for CBC to tweet, but they're not going to tweet as much. They're not giving us as much of the good stuff, is what they say, right? Not as much of the good stuff, according to CBC. So what are we going to do on Twitter now? Well, good news. Well, let me before I tell you what else is going on Twitter, let me just say what Brody Fenlon, right? He's some editor over at the CBC. probably is farting in a jar this weekend if he's friends with Irish people to do his part, right? So he's probably, I'm just guessing, I don't know if he's a jart farer, but a fart jar, farting in a jar, but you know, he might be. So here's what he has to say about press freedom. So first of all, so much has changed in the media landscape over the last 30 years is his scope. It's 30 years, right? So much has changed. Thanks, editor of the news. And independent fact-based journalism has increasingly challenged, right? First by a digital revolution that upended business models. Oh, wow. And content creation, right? Smaller newsrooms and things like that. But he made a point of bringing up Twitter. At the heart of press freedom is the understanding that no external government group or special interest should influence a news organization's journalism. A few weeks ago, Twitter CEO Elon Musk labeled the CBC News Twitter account as government-funded, along with several other public broadcasters around the world, prompting a swift response. A number of broadcasters, including CBC Radio Canada, paused their activity on the official Twitter accounts or announced they're leaving the platform. As I noted at the time, the controversy is not really about delineating how public broadcasters are funded. For the record, so that this is his big like mic drop. For the record, CBC Radio Canada, as a crown corporation, received $1.2 billion in federal funding and generated $650 million by other means, advertising, subscriptions, or syndication of its content. Rather, so it's not about labeling it government funded, even though, according to them, they get 2/3 of their money from the government. That wasn't the problem, he says. No, come on. Rather, the problem is that Twitter's posted definition of government funded referred to outlets that may have varying degrees of government involvement over editorial comment, and Musk has on several occasions linked government funding to state influence and media bias. No government has involvement or influence on the journalism of CBC News and Radio Canada Info, our French language service. CBC's editorial independence is enshrined. It's enshrined, damn you, enshrined in Canada's Broadcasting Act. So you can't change it. That's what they say, right? So it had nothing to do with the 2/3 of the money come from the government. Come on, that doesn't mean anything. They don't have to. Just because they were suing the other party in Canada last election doesn't mean they were in the bag for the party that won. Come on, just a little bit of litigation against a political party. Come on, who cares, right? It's fine. Don't worry about it. They don't do anything about the money. It's just 2/3, right? The big news on Twitter, CBC is back, everyone. And there was another thing that happened on Twitter yesterday. I don't know if you noticed, but the largest cable news show in the history of the planet, the star of that show, Tucker Carlson, has announced that he will go exclusive to Twitter, right? So, Twitter has, I guess, a little more content than just the CBC now. Lots of people reading it. Apparently more people than ever, right? All those folks who said that Elon Musk was an idiot, and what about his $44 billion, and he's going to lose $44 billion, and the thing's only worth $20 billion now. You lost $20 billion. Oh my God, right? So that whole story suddenly changing. It looks like the largest cable news host is going to go exclusive to Twitter and should bring a pretty big audience with them, right? So lots of people talking about it today. It seems like that's what everyone's talking about. But last night, NBC News reacted in real time, and Tom Costello, the host, brought in Brian Stelter, who got fired from CNN a little while ago and is now going to be doing turns on NBC, it appears, right? So he wrote in, I think, The Atlantic, or no, Vanity Fair or something the other day. He did the thing with the WEF, right? He went to the WEF. That was the first time he'd appeared in public at Davos after he was canned by CNN. And since then, he's had this weird, conspicuous thing of ending up in media outlets that, according to Glenn Greenwald, right? You're not hearing it from me, but people like Glenn Greenwald will say that NBC, Vanity Fair, and several other media outlets kind of like guys who glow to put them on the network. So there he is on NBC right away with reaction. And this is what he says. He says that because he was worried, right? So he comes on. And Brian Stelter says, will anybody be able to police what Carlson says? Or is this the point? It's just a free-for-all, right? So it's a free-for-all. And then Stelter responded by claiming that Tucker's increased presence on Twitter will cement the platform as a right-wing website. It's a right-wing website now. And he also called it right-wing extremist. So it's a right-wing extremist, right-wing website. And who's going to police what he says now? It's just a free-for-all, right? So those are his big issues. And remember, when he was still employed by CNN, Stelter had this to say. He was one of those people that had a problem with the $44 billion price tag. He thought he knew better ways to spend the money, right? 44 billion that Elon had to blow, according to him, could have been spent better, right? So he thought of it as like you're throwing a party, right? Here's what he says, right? If you get invited to something where there are no rules, where there is total freedom for everybody, do you actually want to go to the party, or are you going to decide to stay home, right? Because total freedom for everybody means the party too good. Don't want to go there, right? Get out of there. And especially if there's no police around, right? If there's no police at the party to tell Tucker what to say, are people going to go? I don't know. We'll see, right? So the big problem there is no one to police it. And Dave Rubin says this, right? And I thought this was great. So NBC News bringing on fired CNN potato Brian Stelter to discuss how to stop Tucker Carlson from speaking his mind is absolute perfection, right? And it is pretty good. Right, watching him, he was complaining about the 44 billion, right? And now I don't know if you can really complain about the 44 billion, when Tucker comes on board. I think it does something for the valuation, right? Bitcoin Graffiti says the bird can't fly with just a right wing. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, the bird. I'm going to steal that. That is excellent. Thank you for that, Bitcoin Graffiti. Indeed, the right wing, flying bird isn't going to make it, right? Just not going to make it. So the reactions, again, just hilarious. There's a whole bunch, but there's a few things. So obviously it wasn't just the Brian Stelters who were crying and having a meltdown on air last night about who's going to police Tucker and what are we going to do now. There were some really neat things that came out about the whatever is going on. So Tucker did the video last night, millions of views, specifically talked about how folks are pitted against each other, more or less hinting at the adversarial nature of some of the PSYOP operations and how they're specifically designed to increase division and increase American polarity, right? So some interesting stuff. But the deal itself, or lack of a deal, was commented on. So here's what David Sachs says, right? So the best part of the Tucker Twitter deal is that there's no contract, right? So there's just no contract. The significance of Tucker bringing his show to Twitter is that it's not a media deal. He's going to operate under the same terms as everyone else, the same tools available to citizen journalists as now. So good that even the top-rated professional, that the tools are so good now. The same tools available to citizen journalists are now so good that even the top-rate professional can use them. And indeed, when Elon Musk commented on Tucker arriving, he said exactly that. He says he'll be policed by community notes just like anybody else, right? So there'll be no difference in how that stuff is handled. Let me see if I have that quote from him. Anyway, Elon went ahead and said that. Elon also announced yesterday that Twitter is basically going to become a phone, right? So he attacked WhatsApp yesterday and said, don't trust WhatsApp, big scam, which many people have been saying for a long time. I think WhatsApp was a direct Andreas Antonopoulos piece of advice from like 2015 telling you to get rid of WhatsApp, right? So you can go back in time and watch old Bitcoin shows where already Bitcoiners were saying WhatsApp, complete and total scam, stay away. So Elon yesterday also calling it a scam, and Elon mentioning now that on Twitter they're going to have voice and text capacity. So the tool suite now of Twitter growing, right? So more tools coming in. You're starting to see it as, because it's not even called Twitter anymore. We know that, right? It's called X, the same thing that Elon originally built in the 1990s, the X app to be everything, right? So Looks like that's happening. So Twitter is going to launch voice and video chat, right? So this is according to Radar Hits. That's the Bitcoin archive mainstream media, or just, breaking news handle, right? Radar Hits. So it's the same as the Bitcoin archive that we all love. He's launched this a little while ago, or she. I don't know who's behind Bitcoin archive. Now anyone in the world can talk without giving a phone number. So that's also an advantage over WhatsApp. You don't need a phone number in order to use this system. And who knows about backdoors or whatever, right? Here's the truth about any communications app, right? Signal, Telegram, none of them have privacy, simply because there's a two-way channel, right? You're sending it to someone. You don't know what they're going to do if their phone gets stolen or whatever. So anything you write down, remember that, anything you write down can be surfaced at some point. So there is no true private app, simply because apps are between two people. You don't send messages to yourself on a communications app. So by their very nature, it's unavoidable. So it used to be in the old days, if you needed some privacy, you went on a walk in the forest, right? Probably still your best bet, right? Go on a walk in the forest. If you really need privacy, and just speak, right? That's probably the only real true way in person to get any privacy. If you're using apps, all of them have a problem, but this looks better than others, right? You don't want what happens on WhatsApp, where it looks like, I think something that I've even seen that went a little viral over the past 24 hours was, and I think this is what Elon was talking about when he was saying WhatsApp is dangerous, that the voice recorder and speaker microphone or whatever can turn on at the behest of a third party. So it's not truly a P2P system, right? So P2P is your best bet for messaging. You have to trust the other person, right? Even in Telegram or Signal or whatever it is, right? All of those things force you to trust the person on the other end, because they can just show the messages, and then there's no privacy, right? So don't get fooled. If you don't want anything to ever come out, don't write it down, right? That's the only way you can really do it, right? And any one of these so-called privacy communications app that you use, just assume they're not private, right? I don't know anything about the inner engineering of Signal, well, I used to, actually. That's not true. I used to study this stuff and paid close attention to it, but it became not a very fruitful exercise, simply because the aspect of it being P2P means that the other person on the other end can always show what's there. So not that vital that the engineering is perfect, because you got to trust people no matter what, right? So there you go. So back to the Tucker deal, right? So Greg Price writes, Tucker Carlson bringing the most successful cable news show of all time to Elon Musk's Twitter is going to be the biggest seismic shift America's media landscape has ever seen. Corporate media is dead. Establishment narratives are on notice. All of us are the media now. And I feel good, because, when I first started with this every morning, and every one of us joining and coming here in the mornings, I stuck on Twitter with the Periscope, and this was before Elon bought it. Remember, Elon hadn't quite bought it yet. But I said, I think Twitter is not going to be such a complete mess going forward. I think it's going to work out. So I'm glad I've consistently done it. And now that the tools are going to get better, I'm really happy about that. Periscope still sucks, by the way, right? That's why I always put a YouTube link below when I share on Periscope. Periscope, it's hard to fast forward and rewind, get back to your place. But we all saw Elon Musk on Periscope this past weekend. Looks like he's taking it seriously and is going to dust the old thing off and give some new toys to it and make it better and stronger. And that would be great, right? So Cernovich also says, Tucker was smart to do a video. Fox News claims they have him locked up, but Fox News does not want to have to sue him. Imagine the audience outcry. They're hoping Tucker's sits on his hands waiting. If there's going to be conflict, bring it to the enemy first. Make them respond. So he's talking about Tucker doing the video because, of course, there's people out there saying that there's a legal agreement that the contract between Fox and Tucker, which doesn't run out for a year, precludes him from starting up any sort of competitive show, and that he is bound by a non-compete type of situation. But it looks like his lawyers, Tucker's lawyers, arguing that the Fox folks have already breached the agreement by firing him. So no matter what, it looks like he'll have some space in which to operate. And indeed, Fox will probably have to sue him at this point in order to shut him down. So that's good news. Now, think about what Tucker can do without the constraints of a media organization, because he was talking specifically about that when, it's the same idea that the CBC folks were saying, we're not government, the government can't tell us what to say, right? In the same way that Jeff Bezos doesn't need to walk into the Washington Post head office in order to tell them what to do. They kind of guess, right? They kind of mind read what Jeff Bezos would want, kind of a normal human thing, right? And what Tucker was saying in his video last night was that everyone, without having to speak it, understands there's a limit to what you can say. There's certain subjects you can't go into because there is a corporate hierarchical structure that will prevent you from talking about these things. Now, we talk very regularly about Coase theorem here, about the theory of the firm, about where companies even come from, transaction externalities being internalized. And when you have those transaction externalities internalized and they morph into I've been calling it AI for a while, that companies were the first AI in a sense, because we imbued these legal structures with the ability to enter into agreements with humans and have obligations and responsibilities towards other people, and they would act in a certain way and behave in a certain way. And now I obviously don't think that the construct of a company is like the same as a large language model or anything like that. I mean to merely say what the division for AI will be, right? That a corporate trained AI is not the same as a personally trained AI. And that a lot of the worries we have from corporate AI actually stem from corporate structure itself and the top-down nature of how companies were created. And what Tucker was talking about was exactly that. The corporate nature of a media company is what is most restrictive. Doesn't matter which company, Fox, CNN, NBC, any of the others, they can be captured from the top. And if you're captured from the top, it's very difficult to talk about anything you feel like, because there is a form of suppression and censorship that comes from corporate interest. And corporate interest will supersede your, as a journalist, pursuit for the truth. So DC Drano here starts talking about now what Tucker's show can be about now that he's not with Fox anymore. That he now suddenly can tap into any one of the narrative threads that are out there and this news stories that people are very curious about. So what he put a list together, DC Drano puts a list together. He says, Jeffrey Epstein's client lists, the January 6 tapes, the biolabs in Ukraine, the US nuclear technology in Ukraine, vaccine injuries and deaths, money laundering in Ukraine. Tucker is now free to expose it all. And with free speech on Twitter, the entire world will be able to see it. So remember the $44 billion thing? Oh, Elon, what an idiot. He lost money. He now gets the juiciest stories by far, by far, are going to be published on Twitter. And again, we know the community notes part is going to work. So just look at, you can already start to see the difference and how much of the momentum it takes out of corporate media's gaslighting and psyop capacity. So the story that the fake news is going with today is that Trump has been found guilty of sexual assault, right? That Trump was found guilty of sexual assault yesterday. That's what they're going straight with it, right? It's sexual assault. And indeed, you had Eric Swalwell, who came out and said, Donald Trump has been convicted of sexual assault, and Kevin McCarthy is all in with his sexually abusive pal. And Community Notes rushes in and says Trump was found civilly liable on some of the claims brought against him in a civil lawsuit. A defendant of a civil liability is either liable or not liable. Trump was not charged with or convicted of a crime. So if you guys don't know the actual backstory and you're just taking slaps from mainstream media right in the face and not really paying attention, here's what actually happened, right? So there was a lady who accused Trump of something. And we mentioned the video the other day where Trump just came in and said, well, she's not my type. And then he even tells the woman interviewing him that she's like her. She's also not his type and he wouldn't touch her. And then I was laughing about it quite a bit. It was when he was talking about the Billy Bush Sunday video when he said he would, the very vulgar, right? I hate having to defend Trump. I don't like it, right? I don't want to have to do it. but you got to defend a person who's innocent, right? So when he made that the really disgusting thing that he said, right, about grabbing, it's awful, right? And let's not kid ourselves, awful, right? Just terrible. So the woman asked him about that. He goes, yeah, well, for millions of years, it's been true. Like, yeah, celebrities can kind of do what they want. And she goes, do you think you're a celebrity? Imagine asking Donald Trump if he himself believes that he's a celebrity. That's pretty good. So, so Trump, this whole thing, right? So here's what you got to understand. It was never a criminal case. The woman accused him publicly of rape, right? Trump defended himself by calling her a liar, right? So the civil case that was brought forward was not to determine whether or not he raped her or anything like that. It's whether or not he defamed her for calling her a liar. That was it. That's all it was, right? So this thing that they're saying he's guilty of rape or whatever, wrong. It's not that at all. It's her defending herself by being called a liar. So him defending himself by being called not a rapist was not ever in evidence. That's not what they were talking about in this civil trial. What they were talking about was him saying she's a liar, I didn't rape her, and then her going to the civil case to say, I'm not a liar. Now, they don't have to prove, right? The point here is not to prove one way or the other. It's just a balance of probabilities. And they say she's not a liar. It does not mean anything about the rape, right? It's a defamation thing, right? So he defended himself against a woman's false allegation, called her a liar. She brought him to a civil court to say, I'm not a liar. You've defamed me, right? You've defamed me. So in the end, I think it just does the same thing it did with him being arrested in New York. It probably helps Trump, right? No one has any confidence in these legal systems anymore. And certainly no one has any confidence in the way media has covered this thing, right? So it's another reason why people are going to be shutting off the news, not falling for this stuff. And Trump's own folks, I think, are going to be, totally down with it. So, and it's another one of these cases, right? Here's the other one with the terrible things that have been happening in Texas, right? With the two deadly events. We don't like talking about these things at all. But what's been going on since has been pure Moscow time, right? So now I hate having to mention skin color and ethnicity and origin, such terrible things to have to talk about. It's 2023, for God's sakes, right? We shouldn't be here. We should not be talking about this stuff anymore. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't be important, but it is for this case. So the fella who was doing the shooting, right, was a Mexican guy. I mean, he's a Mexican guy, right? And so they're calling him a white nationalist. So we talked yesterday about what was going on. Remember the Larry Elder, that's the black face of whiteface or white supremacy or whatever they call them. So there's a whole genre out there of calling, black people and Mexican people white supremacists. There's a whole genre, right? You can go see. There's all kinds of them. But here's what really looks terrible, right? So Greg Price has this as well. A guy who works for Bellingcat literally works hand in glove with the CIA. So he's talking about this fella named Tolar. Arik Tolar. Arik, not Eric. A-R-I-C. Arik. So Arik went through all this stuff about the Mexican guy, right, who committed the mass shootings. And they say that he posts on a Russian social media site that no one's ever heard of. That he's being a Nazi and he was inspired by Libs of TikTok and Tim Pool episodes, right? So Tim Pool and Libs of TikTok, a Jewish New York woman, right? She's Jewish. I hate, like I said, I hate having to say these things. It's so silly having to categorize people according to identity in order to tell a story. But if I don't, you won't even understand what I'm talking about, right? So here's what's going on. So this fella Arik, right, says Timcast fan. So Tim Pool has been brought into this thing where you got a Mexican white supremacist, and he's the one who caused all this trouble. Does everyone remember the Dave Chappelle skit? Right? Remember what I told you about comedy in the modern world and why we even do Moscow time. And for those of you who are new, who don't understand the limit that I put on myself with Moscow time, that I can't actually give a punchline about why it's funny. It just has to be the headline itself. It has to be this merger of the comedic world with the literal world. And we can't tell the difference anymore. They're the same, right? Because things have gotten so crazy. Comedy and fake news are one and the same. They're the same thing. That, like I say all the time, I go to MSNBC for the laughs. I go for the laughs. CNN, little less funny, but still pretty funny, right? I can go, if I wasn't so, CBC gets a little deeper, it bores a little deeper into my brain. So I just can't look at it because it still gets me angry. So I have to avoid it, right? I don't know how it has that magic over me. It's just so over the top stupid that it gets me angry. I think probably the Irish people worrying about the farts in the jars, they're probably in the same boat as me as far as their local media goes, right? Their local state-sponsored media. You know, I don't know. I can't watch all of them for the last, but CNN was just a gag fest for years. Hilarious, right? So if you guys don't know, that's how we do Moscow time. We can't add a punchline. And this is one of those examples, right? We just can't add a punchline to some of this stuff. They found all this stuff that the person said and blah, 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 blah. The man himself who said it, right, works for the UN, WEF, the EU, all these different groups, and somehow found all this information about this guy. And again, it's literally the skit from Dave Chappelle years ago, the blind racist white supremacist who was black, right? You know, some funny elements to that. But here's how it all comes together, right? Here's how what's happening with the news, with Tucker now being able to explore all kinds of new stories that were verboten. You couldn't go near them for years. It brings up exactly what Robert F. Kennedy has said in the past 2 days. So Kennedy just taking no prisoners right now, just blasting everything that he thinks, putting it out there. I think his voice is even getting better, by the way. And I predicted this. I predicted he would re-find his voice and his voice would become more clear along this campaign trail. Something about it made me think there's a psychosomatic element to what happened to his voice. I'm no doctor, right? No doctor. I just think that there's going to be some breakthrough in the way he speaks, and it's already there. I see it already. And as he stops self-censoring more and more and comes up with his own opinions and says what's on his mind, I think it's going to get even better, right? So here's what he says, that the CIA rigs elections and assassinates leaders who refuse to comply with their agenda. And yesterday started calling again for more information about his uncle's death and his father's death. And so he tweeted a picture of him and his uncle when he was a little boy and his uncle was president. And so when he was a boy as well, his dad was the attorney general to the president, right? So the dad hired his brother in the executive branch in order to go after LBJ a little bit too. Let's not forget, right? So we're not going to get into too many of the JFK things today, but I'm sure we're going to be talking more about LBJ and the CIA coming up, right? So here Robert Kennedy says, here is a picture of me with my uncle whose wisdom affected me profoundly. Today, these words are especially relevant. A nation that is afraid to let its people judge truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. As a senator, Joe Biden voted for the Assassination Records Act of 1992, requiring that all documents related to the killing of JFK be released by 2017. But President Biden is still keeping thousands of pages heavily redacted, including 44 pages related to a shadowy CIA agent and a covert program that had contact with Lee Harvey Oswald just months before my uncle was killed. Nobody should be surprised when Americans are distrustful of government that refuses to reveal 60-year-old secrets. The American people are entitled to see every document as the law requires. The majority of people working at the CIA are good, patriotic people committed to their missions and the law. My own daughter-in-law was a field agent, and she is among the bravest people I have known. Isn't this perfect persuasion from RFK? Isn't that absolutely perfect? My family, it's not everybody. Where are the documents? Why can't we hear about them? Now, we've criticized Trump many times for not making those public. We have, right? We have mentioned to you that Trump had every opportunity And in the same day, that's why I don't feel like defending Trump as much as I might have 4 years ago or in a past administration. Trump's last day in office is his worst. It's not even close, right? No Assange pardon, no Ross pardon, no Ed pardon, and no CIA documents. Now, I've said as well, I can be sympathetic, right? He told Judge Napolitano he knew what was going on, and the judge asked him to put the JFK stuff out in those last few weeks before he was leaving office in that January 2020 time period. And Trump told him, you wouldn't do it if you saw what I saw. That's what he said. You wouldn't do it if you saw what I saw. Now, what did he see? I don't think it's just about, Americans don't want to be faced with the fact that perhaps a president who was vice president at the time colluded with the deep state in order to remove a president and change the order of power in the country. I don't think it was that necessarily. I think it was that they were willing to kill a president, and he must have felt threatened by it. That's the only thing I can come up with. Maybe one day we'll know. Still, I think he should have done it, but that's just me. It's easier to say. He's got family and kids and all this stuff, right? And it didn't look like they were ready to stop in the case of JFK. They got the brother before he became too much of a problem, RFK's dad, right? So this stuff's going on out there, and people are going to keep asking questions. But indeed, with Tucker now on Twitter, we're going to see and hear more stories. Now, remember, I started covering RFK here with you guys in the morning last October because of the first time Tucker ran a story about the CIA's involvement in JFK's assassination. That's when he did it, right? That's when he first started talking about it. And right away I said, well, this RFK guy, he's got, some doubts about his, what he says about science or whatever those things, right? I mentioned it at the time. Not everyone agrees with what he says. There's a lot of people who doubt his credibility. And I still think that there's a reason for some people to doubt his credibility. I know we've talked about some of the nuclear energy stuff before. Again, and I was corrected the other day on the show. You all reminded me he did say it in the All In podcast. I didn't hear it. I must have missed it. I didn't pick up on it. But it's true. I went and checked. It's definitely true. I think he'll change, right? We can't expect perfect in this case, right? He's a person like any other and makes mistakes, and that's fine, right? But the things he's getting to here about speaking about things in the open, about having these conversations, about being able to reconcile all the things that have happened in American history, about what he said with what's going on in elections abroad, right? America goes in, messes up elections, and assassinates leaders who win elections that they don't sanction, right? I've been saying for a long time, the whole thing that we're experiencing now in America has everything to do with those tactics coming home to America. America is reaping what it sowed, right? America did to itself what it did to other countries. They made the 2020 election look incredulous, right? And we can all see it, right? Everyone can see. You can spend you can spend hours watching people in 2016 doubt the Trump win over Hillary, and no one says a word about it, right? That was a normal election to question. If you question the 2020 election, you're an election denier, you're all these other terrible things, right? So we've already seen this system play out in America. We had an election that very few people should think is credible at this point, right? Very few people should think it's credible. Even if the voting machines were correct, even if all of that stuff was correct, that the laptop story was suppressed the way it was in the days before the election, that the government, that the deep state was so involved in suppressing that story, that alone didn't give a fair and honest airing of the problems. And whether, again, I will defend Hunter. I will, right? We still don't know the details. Innocent until proven guilty, all the rest of it. Absolutely. And I do think a lot of the things of the 500 or whatever so-called criminal charges that Hunter faces, 400 and whatever of them are the same as the shit they have Trump on all the time, right? It's like, document management, the person who was supposed to send a document somewhere didn't do it right, and then you didn't file it here or sign a paper. It's a bunch of that shit, I imagine, right? I bet. Now, there's some really bad stuff on the Hunter Biden laptop as well. So I'm not denying that, right? absolutely not denying that. But we are in a fog of war, very difficult to tell what's going on. And I think Hunter deserves a defense like anyone else, right? I'm not suggesting that, but we should have been able to have the conversation before the election. I think that was appropriate, right? Because remember, the whole point about Trump and Russia collusion was that he was blackmailable, right? They had blackmail material on him. If your own son has blackmail material on, and you're the president, well, guess what? You are blackmailable, right? So if it's just about talking about who's blackmailable, we should have been able to have that conversation. We never did, right? So that changed a lot of people's perception about the credibility of the 2020 election. And indeed, there are huge percentages of Americans who still don't find the 2020 election credible at all. Not just Republicans. I think there's pretty wide acceptance. Now, the people who get all their information from central broadcasting have a different opinion, right? If you question it, there were murders that happened after in January 6th because of the insurrection, right? Totally different planet, totally different planet. But this ability to spin Americans into these two poles is what has been going on in the media for so long. And now that we have this opportunity to come together, I think, even the way Bobby Kennedy Jr. talks about coming together when the fake news questions him about his family, for example. Oh, your family is not into your candidacy. They've said we're embarrassed and that you're a conspiracy theorist and all of these things. And he'll say, look, families can argue. I love my family no matter what, right? And I think now we're going to have more of those types of conversations. I think Tucker, now, as I understand, Tucker's audience is widely distributed, a little bit like what RFK seems to be doing. He can communicate over enemy lines in a sense. Some people say he had a pretty large Democrat audience that would come in and watch him on Fox. I think that can only grow, right? I think he can take what he had from Fox, and I think he can grow it much more with folks who are still looking for and are interested in this kind of news. So bringing it all together, right? The one holdout group, the one group that never really left Twitter, that never really sat in the spun, psyoped versions of reality that the mainstream media forced people into by using spin and getting a high degree of polarity between red and blue. The one group that I see that always existed outside of that are the Bitcoiners. Right? Bitcoin on Twitter has always been its own fiefdom. It's always been its own planet. Right? It's its own universe. It had its own concerns. It had its own focuses. It had its own arguments. It had its own debate. You can go from political Twitter or Trump Twitter or Blue Anon Twitter or Q Anon Twitter, and you'll get all kinds of crazy stuff and people frustrated and all those things. You come to the Bitcoin one, you're in your own planet, right? It's its own planet. And I remember in the big run up in 2020 and 2021, when you started to see Bitcoin Twitter actually go center stage on Twitter, that was new to us, right? We had always been this side thing, interesting, fighty for what mattered for Bitcoin. It was never kumbaya, right? I'm not arguing that Bitcoin Twitter was ever a kumbaya. It was never get along. But that's what made it so refreshing, is that you were able to still have fights and still argue and still debate, but not retreat to these set polarities and talking points that were being distributed by media organizations so that you could continue to fight. We had to make our own talking points. We had to make our own stuff. And it was very much a P2P network existing within Twitter talking about Bitcoin. And to this day, I still don't believe Bitcoin would have ever reached where it reached without Twitter, right? Without that tool to be able to talk and argue and debate and get a sense of the decentralized community's presence in the world. And I still believe Bitcoin has a disproportionate size on Twitter compared to what it represents in the global financial world. For example, you have all these normal finance people that are constantly asked to talk about Bitcoin, and they don't want to, especially if they don't understand Twitter and they don't understand how relevant it is on Twitter. But going forward now, Bitcoiners are primed to take advantage of this medium like no other group. We never abandoned it. We never left. We have Nostr. We have other things. Things are going great. We have other communication protocols. We're trying to build a real decentralized P2P one. I think it'll work. I still post on Nostr. I love Nostr. Total fan. Don't always love the Twitter algorithm, especially with all the fighting. Don't want to see all these people fighting every day. Really gross. Did not want to see first-person shooter for real going through schools like they broadcast the other day. No, I don't want it suppressed either. I just don't want it in my feed. Like I don't. I choose homeschool so that I don't have to deal with anything to do with shootings at school, right? Like that it wasn't even to avoid a shooting at school. I didn't even want my kids to have to learn the protocol to how to deal with a shooting at school. That's why we don't go, right? And I'll, for other reasons too. But I don't want to see those videos. I know it happens, and I'm not trying to hide my head in the sand that there are terrible things going on in the world. Absolutely not, right? I just don't need to see 3 minutes that's like addictive. It's like fentanyl, right? I don't want to see that stuff live. So the folks who know how to use Twitter, take a Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Vivek, who's coming to Bitcoin 2023, by the way. Vivek, he had a tweet yesterday about American independence from China, right? That we're addicted to digital fentanyl. TikTok, we're addicted to the actual fentanyl. We're addicted to the consumerism, and that we need a declaration of independence from China. That's what he said. We need a declaration of independence from China, right? Great framing, great imagery. And that's the kind of crazy shit that simply would never get dealt with properly in mainstream media. Now, when you say that, and we have these new tools on Twitter, and we have people on Twitter that are saying interesting things, and that Twitter will continue to be the place where the most interesting things are said, where the smartest people debate, where the smartest people hone and practice their talking points and refine their arguments and all that stuff, that is all still happening. And more now with Tucker being there, we're going to have, I think, one of the most entertaining next few months in the world. And it's perfectly primed for Bitcoiners to take advantage of, to spread our arguments about what's going on with the economy and what's going on with central banking and the bank cartels and the crime families and all of those things. So I think we're going to see Tucker talk a lot about CIA manipulation, systems of control based on money, and Bitcoin. So we win, right? 2024 is going to be the greatest election we've ever seen in the history of America, and Bitcoin is going to be center stage. So everything's getting set for 2023 here. Let me get to some quotes. And I think that's all I got. So, do you think that Twitter will integrate Lightning? I mean, a lot of this is superficial if it seems Elon doesn't integrate Bitcoin payments. Thoughts? I think he will. I think someone leaked something, blah, blah, blah. If not, I mean, he does have an interest in creating his own thing. I mean, Nostr is there, right? I don't know if Twitter makes it to the end of the line. I think it'll be great for the next little while. And I do hope he puts some form of Bitcoin back into Twitter. Of course, this was all there before, but it sucked and it didn't work very well. So we'll see. I mean, I think so. I don't think it's necessary though. Again, I think that Bitcoiners using the medium to spread knowledge is as important as spreading the coin. But I could be wrong. Telegram has self-destruct messages and end-to-end encryption. Yeah, Ollie, I know that, but screenshots don't self-destruct. And, I'm just saying, don't expect anything to be private if you're using a private app, even if the engineering makes it private, right? That's what I mean. If you really need privacy, you got to be live, and you got to be somewhere where there's no Siri or that other dumb shit, Alexa. I'm glad I've always been rude, super rude to the bad AI, the stupid corporate AI. I've never said a kind or polite word to Alexa, and she's not welcome in my house. There's no Alexa here. She's a dumb bitch. Remember that. All right. Siri too, just a complete idiot. We don't want any, pardon my language. We don't want them around. Right? We love smarter AI. The amount of people that Tucker will bring to Twitter is going to be huge. I think so. Yeah, I think so. I saw Tucker's announcement video 4 hours in, and it had 31 million views. Yeah, I don't even know what we're at. 82 million views now. Jeez Louise. Amazing. Amazing. Including The Guardian, yeah. 82, yeah. Insane, Bob Builder says. Good morning. Another great day. We love it, Joseph. We're loving life. What's the difference between community notes and fact checking? I agree. Context is always needed. Yeah, they're the same thing. Yeah, it's just context. Fact checking is we've talked, Mr. Bitcoin, a lot about the algorithmic way community notes is configured, and it literally is just the best counter argument. If there's a great counter argument, you get it, and that's what I like. For another great day. Think he definitely didn't think. Yeah, I had a feeling. Seems to me the outcome was predetermined. Yeah. Have another great day. Count on chat. Is Bellingcat? Yeah, it's a media website. Exactly, Austin. Yeah. Clint from Liberty Lockdown has been on top of this Tim Pool / shooter situation. I haven't. Yeah, I've seen a few people. It's just ridiculous when they go out and try and drag Tim Pool. It's like trying to drag Glenn Greenwald into these things. Their bona fides are great. Yeah, that was so bad, Don Jr. and BitBoy, wasn't it? Yeah, I wanted to reach out to Don Jr. just to tell him, like, man, you got a lot of friends that can help you here, and he ain't one of them. Just disgusting. Tucker could do some presidential debates, maybe. I'm sure someone will resist. They're all going to resist, bud. Well, not all. I mean, there's no way Biden is going anywhere near Tucker Carlson. Still going to be a uniparty causing each side to fight with each other. Tucker will just push the scale one way. Yeah, the uniparty's not gone, but its ability is going to be weakened, leftist Bitcoiners always seem to have some internal dissonance. Yeah, Austin, a lot of we talk a lot about cognitive dissonance here and what it looks like and how to diagnose it and all that stuff. So that's like one of our main points of view. And leftist Bitcoiners have had it bad for a long time. Bad. Yeah, Austin mentioning here that it had Lightning already. Exactly. It did. I mean, it had it at the beginning, no one used it and no one cared, but it was shit. It was shit, right? As far as I remember, I couldn't get it to work and that kind of stuff. What do I think about Nostr? I love Nostr. I'm a big fan of Nostr. So far, so good. I haven't been using it in the past couple of days. I think that's where I'm still failing, is that I've made it a habit and I haven't kept it up because it just requires that much more discipline. But I will. I love it. I think it's the future. And the doesn't allow screenshots of there's another camera or software. The whole hosting of content on it is still confusing to me. I can't put pictures on it. I can put video links because it's hosted on YouTube, but just getting, like I do all these AI images now and it's just I can't figure out where to host them to get them on the thing. But anyway, these are small things, right? I think Twitter eventually gets Lightning, but it's down the road. Yeah, I'm there, bud. Them can have too many attack vectors from government. Yeah, that's where I'm at. All right, team. It was great to spend the morning with you. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Beautiful and sunny here, right? We're going to find out if there's any more fun Tucker stuff today. We're going to enjoy it, right? All right, everyone. Peace.